It all started on a morning I can never forget. The morning light filtered through the office window, casting bright streaks across the desk. Everything seemed calm, yet inside, a profound change was quietly brewing. My name is Christen, and I've spent most of my life pursuing a career in marketing. I used to be one of the promising young talents in the company, given the opportunity to lead major campaigns and even projects that my colleagues admired. For years, my life seemed perfect. I lived in a small but cozy apartment in the city center, where everything I needed was within reach. My job was stable, I had close colleagues, and my personal life was peaceful. But there were times when I felt something was missing. I tried to mask that feeling by throwing myself into my work, seeing it as a way to escape the emptiness inside. That day, I received a sudden call from my boss. His voice was cold and detached. I didn't think this call would be the end of the career I had worked so hard to build. "We have to reduce staff," he said, "and unfortunately, you're not part of the company's next plans." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At that point, I had been giving everything I had, contributing all my creative ideas to the company. I had helped the company soar to new heights with its marketing strategies. Yet, just because of a sudden change in strategy, I was being let go. The betrayal felt like a hard punch to the face. Even then, I couldn't comprehend what I had done wrong. Never did I imagine that someone like me, who was so passionate about my work and always willing to go the extra mile to achieve results, could be discarded without mercy. I didn't cry, nor did I react. I just sat there, in silence, as though the words didn't really affect me. But deep inside, a part of me shattered. The feeling of betrayal, being cast aside from the company I had poured so much effort into, left me with nothing to do but sit there, staring blankly at the computer screen. At that moment, I no longer felt the pride of a devoted employee. Only emptiness remained. I looked around the room, where the bookshelves and office supplies stood as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling of coldness that surrounded everything. My seat had become a meaningless spot. Then, right after, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Kalista, a close friend from work. She was someone I had shared many stories with about my job and dreams. But this time, her message was another shock. "Congratulations. They just announced that you'll be replacing me in the new project." I couldn't believe what I was reading. Kalista, the friend I had always trusted, was now siding with them. She knew about the change in plans, but didn't say anything to me. This made me feel more alone than ever at this point. It wasn't just the company that had abandoned me, but my close friend too. The loss of trust was so deep that I didn't know what to do next. I had given everything to the company, had made it a part of my life, and now I had to face being cast aside as if I were worthless. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, where all the projects I had worked so hard on suddenly seemed meaningless. The strategies I had carefully designed, the plans I had spent months perfecting, were now just empty numbers. But I didn't cry. I had cried so much during those long days. This time, my feelings weren't of sorrow, but of coldness, a feeling I couldn't quite explain. It was as if I had become exhausted from making sacrifices that were never rewarded. I opened a drawer and discarded all the papers, the contracts I had been involved with, everything I had once considered proof of my dedication. I didn't know what I would do next, but at that moment, all I wanted was to close everything off and find an escape. That was when I realized something very clearly. This world, this company, they didn't care about the value of an individual. They only cared about the final results, about the changes they deemed necessary. And I, the one who had believed in relationships, in the work itself, now had to face the emptiness that no one could help fill. That feeling, the feeling of not being able to trust anyone, not being able to rely on anyone anymore, made me feel like I had lost everything. But the truth was, I hadn't lost anything. I was just standing at a crossroads, unsure of where to go next. But I knew one thing: I had to get up, although at that moment, I didn't know where to begin. After the shock, I no longer felt emptiness. Instead, a coldness gradually took over me. I no longer needed anyone to prove myself, no longer needed recognition or praise. It was just me and one decision: I had to rise. Not immediately, but I knew that if I didn't change my mindset, I would remain stuck in the past forever. The sleepless nights, the endless thoughts. Slowly, I began to build a plan for myself. At that time, I didn't know what I would do, but I knew one thing: I had to start somewhere. And I chose to do what I had always wanted to do: start my own business. Not because I had been fired, but because I realized I had nothing left to lose. The old company hadn't recognized my value, but I believed I could do something for myself, starting from scratch, with no help from anyone, armed only with my experiences and determination. I poured everything into creating a new project. The first day was far from easy. I researched how to start a business, took free online courses, and began searching for potential partners to join me. I knew I couldn't do everything alone. I started reaching out to industry experts and people with experience, but not everyone was willing to share. Some turned me away, others were indifferent, but I didn't give up. Each rejection only made me feel stronger, as if some invisible force was pulling me forward. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, I sat at my old desk. It was the same desk where I had created the marketing strategies that my former company had thrown away. A part of me wanted to change everything, but I reminded myself that, instead of starting over, I should use what I had learned and make it better. Slowly, ideas began to form. They were no longer the generic strategies I had once created. This time, I wanted to create something truly different, something that bore my unique signature. As I began researching the market, I realized one thing: I couldn't just rely on traditional marketing knowledge. I needed to innovate, to find an emotional approach that connected with customers in a way that my old company had failed to do. I began studying emotional marketing, learning how to touch the hearts of consumers rather than simply promoting a product. Those endless hours of studying gradually formed a clear plan in my mind. One afternoon, as I was working, I received a call from an old friend in the industry. She invited me to a gathering where marketing and media experts would meet. A mix of anxiety and excitement filled me. This was a great opportunity to expand my network, to meet people who could help me advance further on this journey. I couldn't pass it up. I arrived at the meeting feeling a little tense, but I also knew this was an opportunity I couldn't afford to miss. Standing among the crowd of experts, I realized I had never felt so out of place. The people here had achieved great things. They had succeeded in their own ways, and I was just a newcomer. However, strangely enough, instead of feeling intimidated, I felt like I could learn a lot from them. I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't making a scene. I simply observed quietly and listened. Every story I heard was a valuable lesson. Some shared their biggest failures, how they had stood up after falling. Those stories, though painful, became a huge source of motivation for me. I realized no one succeeds without facing challenges. I looked at myself, at everything I had been through, and decided I wouldn't give up. That was exactly what I needed to move forward. From there, I began reaching out to more potential clients, gradually building strong relationships. These relationships didn't form quickly, but each small step brought me more trust and motivation. Every day, I took another step, not because I was perfect, but because I dared to face my fears and kept moving forward, even when I didn't know what the future held. Challenges kept arising. Sometimes I had to convince clients that my ideas could bring real value. Other times it was with partners who didn't keep their promises, but I didn't give up. Reality had taught me that if I didn't persist, nothing would come easily. I continued to fight, little by little. Every time I overcame a challenge, I felt stronger. Then, one day, after I had begun to build a small team and secured my first contracts, I received another call, this time from my old company. They said they had recognized the flaws in their previous strategy and wanted to collaborate with me again. But this time, I just smirked. I knew I no longer needed them. I had risen from the lowest point, and now I was the one who could continue writing my own story. I began rebuilding everything from the ground up. Nothing was easy, but I knew I had to keep moving forward, to fight in order to reclaim what I had lost. I couldn't keep living in the pain and betrayal. Every day I woke up, facing new challenges, but at the same time, I could feel the change. This feeling wasn't sudden, but gradual. With each passing day, I grew stronger, more confident in what I could accomplish. One weekend afternoon, as I sat in my small office, looking out the window at the bustling streets, I received a message. It was from Kalista. She wanted to meet. At first, I hesitated. I had once thought I didn't need to speak to her anymore. But then, I decided to meet. A part of me couldn't deny the curiosity. Another part wanted to understand what had happened, why she had suddenly turned her back on me. We met at a small cafe. The space was cozy, but inside, I felt a heavy weight on my chest. Kalista sat across from me, but there was no longer the closeness we once had. She looked at me, her eyes cold and distant, as if an invisible barrier had formed between us. I didn't say anything. I simply watched her quietly. Kalista began to explain what had happened after I left. She said the old company was struggling, and that's why they had to make changes. But that didn't make me feel any better. What I sensed from her was only reluctance, as if she was trying to justify her actions. I had hoped for an apology, but all I got were meaningless excuses. Everything she said made me feel like I had been deceived, like I was cast aside for reasons I couldn't understand. Then, she said something I would never forget. I think you can understand that I was just doing what was best for myself. You would do the same. Wouldn't you? I couldn't believe my ears. Her words felt like a slap to my face, a smooth lie, but one that was cruel. I didn't respond. I just sat there in silence, feeling as though everything inside me was breaking again. Just as I was about to stand up and leave, Kalista added, "But honestly, I don't think you'll succeed. You know, the marketing work you want to do isn't easy." I couldn't contain my anger. She, who had once been my friend, now criticized everything I was trying to build. But instead of responding, I simply smiled. I smiled because I knew. All this time, I had been quietly working and slowly succeeding. I didn't need to prove anything to her because I knew I was on the right path. In the days that followed, I didn't see Kalista again. I continued with my work, pouring more effort into it every day, and things began to show results. However, not everyone wanted to see me succeed. One morning, I received a call from one of my old partners. They told me they had heard rumors about me, that I had failed and couldn't rebuild my work. These people, some of whom were former colleagues who had witnessed my hard work, were now standing on the outside, mocking me. They thought I would fail, but I had persistence that they would never understand. However, not everything was a challenge. I began to gain attention from new clients, people who appreciated what I was doing. Slowly, I built my own brand, my own small company. Things weren't perfect yet, but I knew I was on the right track. My first contracts came in, and I no longer felt lost. I had people who believed in me, and people I could trust. Then, one day, while I was working in my office, I received a call I would never forget. On the other end of the line was a very familiar voice. It was my old boss. They wanted to collaborate with me again. They said their company was struggling, and they needed my help. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. Part of me wanted to refuse immediately because I couldn't forget how they had treated me. But the other part of me thought about the opportunities that could open up. It felt as if I was standing in front of a door, and perhaps this was the moment to decide whether or not I would continue. But what truly made me feel different was the way I viewed myself. I was no longer someone who depended on them. I had been able to stand up and rebuild everything without needing them. I understood that it was in those painful moments that I had learned the most important lesson: no one could define my worth except for me. People could play dirty. They could reject me. But in the end, my success would prove everything. I declined their offer to collaborate, not because I hated them, but because I had found my own path. As the months passed, I began to feel a change within myself. From someone who had relied on the old company, on the people who had left me behind, I was now an independent person, every day. I woke up with a new determination, no longer burdened with worries or doubts about the future. I knew clearly that if I wanted to win, I had to create opportunities for myself. No one could do that for me. Every time I looked at my desk, it felt like I was rebuilding from the ground up, brick by brick, step by step. I started to expand my company, hiring talented employees whom I believed would accompany me on this journey. The relationships I built were not just based on work collaboration, but also on mutual respect and trust. What I wanted was not just success, but to create a work environment where people could grow and feel that their value was recognized. This was something I had lacked in the years I worked at the old company. Then, just as everything seemed to be going in the right direction, I received an unexpected phone call. This time, it was from someone I didn't expect, Kalista. Her voice sounded strange, no longer confident as before. "Christen, I need to talk to you," she said. The feeling inside me was one of skepticism, but there was also a part of me that wanted to understand what was going on. When I met Kalista again, I no longer felt like I did before, when we were close friends. She sat across from me, no longer at ease, no longer the cheerful person she used to be. I realized that the change wasn't just in me, but in her too. She was no longer the person I had trusted, the one I had shared all my secrets and hopes with. But today, I had to face a different person. Kalista began to talk about the failure of the old company, about the wrong decisions they had made. The company couldn't maintain the same level of growth as before, and now they were seeking help. "They have no other choice," Kalista said, "and I know you are the only one who can help them through this difficult time." She added that they wanted me to return. That proposal once again left me feeling confused. They wanted me back to help them, but when I looked at what had happened, I couldn't forget what they had done to me. There was a time when I had given everything, when I had created successful strategies for the company. Yet in the end, I was pushed out, discarded without mercy. I was no longer part of that company, and no matter what, I couldn't go back to help those who had disappointed me. Kalista seemed to notice my silence and started to speak again. "I understand if you refuse, but without you, nothing will change." Those words were a reminder of what I had contributed, but I wasn't someone who could be swayed by empty words. I had changed. I was no longer the weak person I used to be. I could help them, but not to return to those who had failed to appreciate me. I decided to decline the offer, not out of anger, but with calmness. Thank you, Kalista, but I have my own path now. I don't want to go back to where I lost everything. She looked at me in surprise, but she didn't say anything further. I stood up, left the cafe, and didn't look back. At that moment, I felt strangely light, as though I had answered a crucial question without needing to explain more. In the weeks that followed, I continued to develop my company, and big contracts started coming in, new potential clients, new partners. They began to see the true value of what I was doing. I was no longer a part of the old company, but the owner of the work I had built, and I felt proud of that. Yet, one thought still lingered in my mind. Had I done the right thing by turning down the offer to collaborate with the old company? Was I missing an opportunity to prove to them that I could help them? But then, I reassured myself there was no regret. I had taken control of my own life, and that was the most important thing. That day, while sitting in my office, an unexpected notification appeared on the screen. The old company, the place where I had given so much, where I had been cast aside, suddenly announced that they would be closing down. This news didn't bring me joy, but it was a reminder of my own worth. Everything they had done to me had now come full circle. The wrong decisions they made, the people they had rejected, now had to pay the price. But I didn't feel any sense of gloating. I only felt calm. I didn't need to fight them anymore. My success, the growth of my company, was the clearest answer. I had found my own path, and that was what mattered. I stood up, looked out the office window, and in my heart, I felt one thing: I was ready to move forward. Not because of them, but because of myself. I don't know how I managed to rise, but each step I took after that shock gradually brought me back on track. I was no longer the person abandoned by the old company, no longer the one standing in the crowd just to be recognized. Instead, I was the one who took charge of my own story, the one who could determine my own future without needing help or acknowledgement from anyone else. My return wasn't about seeking revenge, but proving that my value wasn't defined by where I came from, but by who I am, by what I do, by what I have built and continue to build. Since I made the decision to turn down the offer from my old company, I've devoted all my energy to my work every day. I worked with relentless perseverance. The marketing strategies I implemented began to show clear results. Projects started to be embraced by clients, and gradually, my company gained the attention it needed. But more importantly, I no longer felt the need to prove myself to anyone. My success wasn't to show them that I was right, but to prove to myself that I had overcome all the pain, all the doubts within me, and that was the greatest reward I could receive. As I started to secure big contracts, I felt like I was in control of the game. I didn't confront anyone directly, nor did I need to prove that I was better than anyone. All I did was keep walking the path I had chosen. Every step was the result of years of perseverance and learning. And I realized that when you truly believe in your abilities and refuse to let anyone make you doubt yourself, you will always find your way to success. One day, I received a call I didn't expect. It was from my old boss, on the other end of the line. His voice was urgent, no longer cold like before. "Christen, I need your help. The company is in crisis. We can't continue without you." The feeling inside me at that moment wasn't excitement. It was a strange calm. His words no longer stirred me, no longer made me want to go back. I didn't need them anymore. I had managed to stand on my own 2 feet, and I knew I couldn't return to be part of the system I had once contributed to without any reward. I didn't answer immediately. Part of me was surprised by the offer, but mostly, I felt calm. I had my own steps to follow. And now, I didn't need to prove anything to them. The truth was, when I had created my own success without their help, I realized that I had never been lacking. I had become the person I had always wanted to be, and there was nothing to regret. The next day, I reopened one of the important contracts I had signed. My company was making steady strides in the market, and I had a fantastic team. People who believed in me, in what I was doing. They weren't just employees. They were people helping me build a community. Each project we worked on was a testament to the perseverance and unity I had built, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to affirm my worth through action. And that, after all, was the most important thing. A month later, while I was sitting in my office, looking out the window, I received a message from a partner. They wanted to collaborate with me to implement a large marketing strategy for a new product. When I looked at the information they sent, I realized this was an opportunity I couldn't miss. This was the moment I could prove that my success wasn't by chance, but the result of continuous effort. I didn't need to confront those who had betrayed me, but I knew I could make the world recognize that I could make a difference. The next day, when I arrived at the partner's office, they welcomed me with the respect that I had never received from the old company. They wanted me to help them execute the marketing strategy I had developed. And when I signed the contract with them, I clearly felt one thing: it was my victory. A victory not because I defeated anyone, but because I had been able to stand firm on my own path, not depending on anyone. As for the old company, they couldn't maintain the stability they had hoped for. Though they had found a replacement, they couldn't fill the gap I had left. A few months later, that company officially declared bankruptcy. I didn't gloat, didn't feel joy from it. I only felt a sense of calm. I didn't need to go back to prove I was right, because I had already proven it with my results. And that was the most important thing. Looking back, I understand that nothing is more important than taking control of your own life, not depending on anyone to prove your worth. Everything I have, all the success I have achieved, has come from my own perseverance and belief in myself. And when you truly believe in your abilities, you'll find that nothing can stop you.